Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., really the big news happened about at the same time here on Thursday afternoon. That was when the Senate vote closed on the nomination for Robert Lighthizer to be the U.S. Trade Representative. Very strong show of support. I think 82-14 was the final vote margin there. And about at that same time as well, in Ohio, Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue was making an announcement on the reorganization of the department, creating a new undersecretary for trade, as well as reorganizing some things, creating a special assistant to the secretary, just an assistant to the secretary for rural development. And so Phil saw a lot of movement there in that very short amount of time, really capped off the news of the week. But we'll start with Lighthizer, and really a strong show of support, 82 votes in his favor.
Yeah, and that goes to the fact that Democrats actually see Bob Lighthizer, because of his work on behalf of the steel industry and other industries in trade cases and trade enforcement cases, they really see him as somebody who's going to be very aggressive with China and other countries. That's his record. Very long record in private practice, and before that at USTR in the Reagan administration.
Mm-hmm. And as we mentioned, a very quick show of support. The vote was open for a little while and waited for some additional senators to come in and make their presence known. But very smooth confirmation process once they were able to overcome the waiver that Democrats were seeking, as well as some minor provisions, minor as in the occupation, not as in less than major here in this case.
Right, and he's really the last major piece of President Trump's trade team, and he's somebody that, while Democrats like him, folks in the agriculture sector and certainly their allies in the Senate see Lighthizer as somebody who's going to, probably their best bet, to work with Sonny Perdue, the Agriculture Secretary, to represent the interest of agriculture in the upcoming negotiations, particularly on the North American Free Trade Agreement. At least they're counting on him doing that, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him and the administration to protect our current trade with both countries, Mexico and Canada.
Mm-hmm. And since Mr. Lighthizer was just confirmed, no news really to report on the top agricultural negotiator for USTR. We'll be expecting that here to come. But the Senate was able to clear his nomination. But we also want to talk about the announcement that Secretary Perdue made in Ohio today. And speaking of trade, I mean, that's going to be a big part of the administration's trade mix, especially when it comes to agriculture, is this new position. I mean, this is not a surprise. He had been talking about this for a while, and it's actually a position that's called for in the 2014 Farm Bill. But Secretary Vilsack was always kind of hesitant to give this position a place at the Department of Agriculture. But it seems like it's really going to be a priority for Secretary Perdue.
Definitely, and this is something, again, that the ag sector is really has been looking to the administration to move on. I was hoping Vilsack would as well. We should point out that trade is now and has been a big part of USDA, but there are trade responsibilities scattered through the department. You have the Foreign Agricultural Service, which is under one undersecretary currently. Those are the folks that are out all over the world, literally, representing ag interest and also monitoring what's going on in other countries. And then you have other agencies, the Food Safety Inspection Service, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and other agencies, all with some responsibilities. This is going to create one undersecretary and put more focus on trade in sort of coordinating trade responsibilities within the department.
But aside from just trade, there was also some news in this reorganization announcement that's concerning rural development. There's no longer an undersecretary for rural development under this reorganization plan, but instead an assistant to Secretary Perdue. This is a person that will report directly to the secretary on matters of rural development. In the announcement and in a press release, the USDA was kind of selling this as an elevation of the position. It's going to be someone that reports directly to the secretary, so therefore the secretary is going to have a lot more of a hands-on approach to rural development within the USDA, especially as President Trump unveils his infrastructure package and things of that nature. But Phil, there's some folks on Capitol Hill that are already seeing things a little bit differently.
Yeah, well, by taking the undersecretary away, that's a position that is confirmed by the Senate, and there has been a undersecretary devoted solely to rural development. That would be gone, and that's where the concern is. I mean, there's the concern that it's going to be that you're starting to hear today with this announcement, and probably hear more of going forward, is that this is not elevating, but it's downgrading rural development by taking it away from a Senate-confirmed undersecretary and the other agencies under that. We'll be hearing more of that in coming days. Senate the Senate and House Appropriations Committees will have something to say about this as well, because they fund the department, and they would have to fund the reorganization that Secretary Perdue wants to do. One other thing to mention on that, it also takes the Natural Resources Conservation Service, moves it from one undersecretary over to combine it with the under the a new undersecretary position with the Farm Service Agency and the Risk Management Agency, the two farm-specific agencies. So a little closer management in terms of with the farm-focused and ag producer-focused agencies.
Mm-hmm. And still no news on who is going to fill these positions. Really no news on sub-cabinet agencies as a whole at the Department of Agriculture. But specifically with the rural development and the NRCS things that we talked about, important to note that Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue is testifying before the House Agriculture Committee next week. I imagine this will come up. Somebody's going to have to mention this at a certain point in that committee.
I'm sure it will. And stay tuned at Agri-Pulse.com. We're hearing we may have some nominations for some of those deputy secretary and some other positions very soon. So stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned indeed. Before we let you go, we do want to mention another confirmation with critical importance to food and agriculture in the Senate happened this week. Scott Gottlieb was confirmed as the head of the Food and Drug Administration, another position that is going to be critical to agriculture and critical to food processors and food producers here in the Trump administration.
And with all these getting these nominees in place means we can start filling in those positions under that may have a more direct role in terms of with FDA, with the food and ag sector. And at USDA as well.
Yeah, the roster is not full, but it's filling up here in the month of May here up on Capitol Hill. But I think that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. Certainly appreciate you stopping by and encourage you, as Phil mentioned, to stay tuned to Agri-Pulse.com as we hear news and rumors and hopefully some confirmations in the near future of folks that are going to fill some of these outstanding positions at the Department of Agriculture. But for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.